Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today comes from South Africa, Bridget Henderson, the owner of Cowgirl Blues. Welcome.
Thanks, Irina. Hi, it's lovely to be here today.
Well, you know what, like when I met you, it just shows me how small of a world it is really for us knitters, because I got introduced to you by one of the participants of West Knits, Humans of West Knits, the series that I did for Stephen West, Mystery Knit Along, where I was interviewing participants of the Knit Along instead of like all the famous people. I actually went people who participate in it and who make Stephen West famous, right? And she heard that I'm going to walk knitting, and she was like, oh my God, you have to stop and say hi to Bridget. So that's why I specifically
happened
your booth to say hi. And I mean, I loved your booth from the first. It was love from the first time, right? And we clicked like immediately. It was like, camaraderie sort of like, there was that's definitely connection.
Yeah.
You didn't start with yarn as your first career. Tell me.
No, I did not.
You found your yarn.
Yeah, so I don't even think yarn is my second career. My first career aspiration was to be a doctor, and I started university at medical school. And in South Africa, you go straight to medical school for a 6-year degree, like you do in the UK. And I did 3 years of medicine and then changed to a BSc. And then I ended up in business and in strategy consulting. And I learned to knit as a child, but when I went to boarding school for high school, I left my knitting needles at home, and I only picked it up again in my mid to late 30s when I was recovering from burnout from my career as a strategy consultant. And yeah, the knitting was an amazing way of taking a break, focusing on something different, using a different part of my brain, and learning to relax and be more receptive rather than just being very driven and focused, which was what was required in the world of consulting. And
I find it very funny, like seriously, like I know that knitting's supposed to be this relaxing thing, right? And then I'm looking at you now, like, are you relaxed now?
No, I'm so not. But in that period, I wasn't running a small business. I was between careers, essentially. And I pretty much had no responsibilities other than figuring out what my next creative project was going to be. And so I learned to crochet and did a bit of amigurumi and started knitting projects. I learned to spin. So that was a very different phase from where I am now, which is I'm a small business owner. I run a small business. I'm responsible for a group of 13, including me, 14 women, and making sure I can pay the salaries at the end of the month. And that's a very different place to be.
Tell me how you found yourself in that place. How did you go from just knitting to like organizing the company?
Well, to like this. Right. So it really was just an incremental process. I started feeling stronger and healthier from the burnout experience. I had imagined that the next phase of my career was going to be in coaching. So I had trained as a life and executive coach. But through the process of the training, I realized that actually I didn't want to help other people to change. I wanted to change myself. And I stumbled on my creative brain and my creative side and really enjoyed exploring that. And when I put that together with what I discovered about raw materials in South Africa, which is that we're the world's biggest producer of mohair and we have great merino wool, it seemed like kind of a no-brainer to see what I could do to start a business using the raw materials and adding more value to them locally and then exporting. So
right, like you mentioned to me that most of the raw materials are just exported out of the country. So you don't really get it in South Africa.
Exactly. So one of the things is that you couldn't buy South African yarn in South Africa like 15 years ago, and the other is that by exporting without adding any value, we don't add value to our economy, and we have crazy high unemployment here. I think I saw an article recently saying that unemployment in the US was 3% or something. I mean, our unemployment is like 35, 40%. And so there's a huge need for economic development, and adding value to local raw materials before exporting them is a great way to do that. So that was kind of, I had this sort of idea, but not a terribly focused former consultant style business plan. And so I just kind of went from one step to the next, and first started making products, some scarves and shawls and things to sell, and people like those. I started experimenting with dyeing, and I really enjoyed the color, and people liked the colors. And then knitters and crocheters started saying, oh, we like your colors, but can we please have the yarn to knit ourselves rather than buying a finished product? And so that's how I ended up in dyeing the yarn, and that has now become the whole business.
Well, I mean, to me, this is like, to you, it might sound like no-brainer. To me, this is like bringing your business career into the yarn, because like, I think like that experience prepared you for your career now with the yarn dyeing. And I find it very interesting, because I often find that, like, let's say I'm knitting something and there is some new technique to me, right? And I'm struggling through it and I'm trying to figure it out. And then the next project comes and it uses this technique and it's so easy, right? So it's like, it's sort of like when I'm learning something and I'm going through something, I don't understand why I even need that. And then like my eyes open and it's like, oh, that's, you know, it was like almost preparing me without me realizing for a bigger and better project, right?
Completely.
Because you have this business background, do you think that put you at advantage in comparison to like other people, other dyers in your area?
Well, it has advantages and it has disadvantages. So one of the advantages is that I'm very comfortable with the business environment. I'm comfortable with the international environment. So exports have been a natural focus for me, and it's been easy to get my head around costing and pricing, and some of the other business aspects of having a yarn business. Whether you're an indie dyer or a yarn company, you still have to understand those things. But I think it's also been a disadvantage because I have always felt like my business, analytical, logical, rational thinking skills are my strength, and that I was the maths boffin, not the artist or creative person at school and in my younger years. And so I've found it quite hard to really embrace my creative confidence. And I often feel intimidated by the people who come from an arts background or whatever, because people go, oh, so-and-so is an artist, so they really understand color, for example. And I'm like, oh, do I really understand color? I've kind of just made it up as I went along. But I think also that's where my coaching experience really helped, is in giving me some tools to understand myself better, to work better with people, and to really help other people who are also on a learning journey. That I can say with true confidence and experience that you don't have to be intimidated by color, and anyone and everyone can learn to find their color palette that they like and get comfortable with mixing colors, because I've done it, you know.
Right. So I mean, I find it also that's what I love about indie dyers. I'm like, every time I see a picture on Instagram, there is like very high probability that I would know who the dyer is without looking at the name above the picture, you know. And your colors are definitely in that category, that you can like tell that it's like, I can, you know, like pinpoint that this is your colors. And by the way, guys, like, if you haven't seen it, like, I had a hard time picking just two at the moment. I was trying to be in control somewhat, right? Because like I do have some stash already.
Yes, so
you do. It was really hard to just like pick two. And when I'm looking at these colors, for me, it's also like quintessential Africa somehow, like the colors of the sunset and the colors of the nature. What's your inspiration? Like, how did that start?
Well, so that's a lot of where the inspiration comes from for me. And my creative journey started with photography. I went on a trip to Southeast Asia, and literally on my first day, I arrived in Kathmandu in Nepal, and I went and bought, it was pre-digital, so I went and bought an old-fashioned film SLR, single lens reflex camera, and then I went hiking in the mountains and just started taking pictures. And I really loved that process, and it got easier for me when cameras went digital because I didn't have a technical background. And I always just like taking pictures. And so that's been something that has been a huge source of relaxation and pleasure for me living in Cape Town, especially, is that I walk on the mountain a lot here. And I love nature. I love flowers and the vegetation on the mountain. So I'm constantly taking pictures, and they've become a huge source of color inspiration because I'll go back and look at the pictures and go, oh, wow, if you really zoom in on a picture of a protea, for example, you can see all these different shades of pink and cream. But then if you look really closely, you can see there's like an incredibly dark purple color in parts of the petals. And so I've started to kind of play with those a lot in how I work with color, and especially that kind of pink green combination, the red, green, yellow, orange, because I see it everywhere in the vegetation here. And I think also there's a lightness and brightness that we have living here in Cape Town, very close to the tip of the African continent, that makes things look different. And we have so much sunshine that, yeah, I think that kind of is infused in the colors that we dye, or certainly is what I try to put into.
Well, you mentioned sort of the artist brain versus business brain.
Yeah.
Your approach to dyeing, like, is that an exact formula, or is it like artistic expression?
No. Well, it's so, I find it so interesting because in order to, I envy a lot of indie dyers who only do creative single batch dyeing, and in order to be a yarn business and have an established yarn company, we've had to create a color palette. And so I'm going to just turn my screen a little bit because you can see it on the wall up there. And those colors have to be repeatable and consistent. And so creating color recipes and really having that consistency of color has been a very important part of the business. And I couldn't do that without our team, because I develop the recipes and then they do the color repetition. And so that's where my business brain comes in to say, okay, in order to be repeatable and sustainable and have good quality and consistency, this is what we need to do. But it's not how I want to dye. And so I get to do the color development. And when I'm dyeing, yes, I can use a picture as a starting point for inspiration, but then I like to go with what's happening in front of me in the moment in the dye pots. And I mean, maybe that's even something we could do as a future episodes. We could actually do some dyeing together. If I could record a video, I can borrow a GoPro from someone or something. But because to me, I start to see what's happening in the dye bath with the colors, and I kind of feel into what wants to happen next. Obviously, from my perspective, with my influences and things, and somebody else standing next to me with exactly the same things would want to go in a different direction. But yeah, I really don't like to be asked to, dye this, and this, or that it's a form of creative expression for me, and that's why I like to kind of be creative about it. So,
well, let's talk about your team, because you rely very heavily on those 13 other women.
Absolutely.
Is that hard to like let go of control and not do everything yourself?
Well, yes and no. So I'm also very clear about the advantages and disadvantages of it. Um, so, the example that I just gave you with the dyeing, it's absolutely amazing to have a team who are happy to come to work. And, different people have different needs. And some people like the structure and consistency and predictability of, here are these things, I have these recipes, I know how to do these colors, and this is what I'm going to do. Other people prefer an environment of creative exploration, and that's absolutely fine. It's beautiful to have both. And so in some areas and in some ways, it's really easy and really helpful having a team. In other areas, it's very difficult because there's some things that are hard to communicate. I've invested my savings and my time and my career into building this business, and I don't want things to go wrong. So I can be a little bit of a control freak at times. And that's stressful and difficult for my team. So I think it's a mix. But I'm very clear that the reason for starting this business was to empower women. Myself, as part of my own journey of finding my creative voice, and building a career and a business for myself, creating jobs, because women in South Africa tend to be on the underemployed side. We have, in my opinion, a fairly patriarchal and conservative culture, kind of across the board. And so creating jobs for women has a huge impact on their lives, their family, and their extended family. And so we are an all-women team, but also this is the kind of business where you can teach people who may not have any other kind of work skills. You can teach people the skills that you need here, because in lots of ways, dyeing is like cooking, and lots of people have experience of cooking for their families at home. There are many aspects of a business, especially this kind of operation, that are like aspects of daily life. And so it's really lent itself to bringing people in, training them, and then helping to upskill them through different interventions to different levels of the business.
Well, when you first started, you did not see it grow to the size that it is now.
No, I didn't. I mean, I guess in my consulting brain, I did start with some grandiose ideas, but not like I really, I mean, there was a little bit of that here, but I don't know that I really imagined what that was about and what it would mean. So one of the things is I went to business school and did an MBA when I lived in Europe. And when I was interviewed for the MBA, they said, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time? And I said, I'll be running my own business. And if that doesn't work, then maybe I'll be a partner in a consultant firm. But when I said running my own business, I definitely didn't imagine this. I imagined, I would step into some corporate role, or I would buy into an established business. I didn't imagine starting one literally from scratch in my kitchen. But it's been such an incredible journey. And I know that I have friends and some of my family members who've known me forever who just kind of can't believe that I'm still doing this, that it's still going, and that we've got here. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, I mean, are you amazed at this journey, like how far you came?
Absolutely. And I really thought when COVID hit in Cape Town, our hard lockdown started on about the 25th of March. And I was supposed to be in Germany at the H&H trade show then, and I cancelled the week before. And I really, when we went into hard lockdown and went home, I remember talking to my brothers and saying, look, at least there's no shame in your business failing because of a global pandemic, because I didn't know if we were going to survive. And I can't believe what COVID has done for crafting. It was a terrible thing to happen to the world, but there have been some beautiful things that we've managed to take out of that, including for so many people, a return to doing more simple practical hobbies and perhaps knitting and crocheting, which people might not have done before.
Right. No, I mean, it was beautiful in that way, with all the horrors around and all the uncertainty around.
Yeah.
Like the community, the crafting community just exploded.
Completely. It was also an amazing opportunity because you couldn't always see people in person, to be able to connect with someone in a physical but remote way, where I could make the scarf or that hat and send it to you, and we could get on Zoom and you could be wearing it, and you would know and literally feel in those materials how much I cared and that I was thinking of you and wishing you well, because you could literally wear it and feel it. And I think that's been an incredible thing and will continue to be.
Well, let's talk about shows, because I met you at Vogue meeting, and now we're going to meet at H&H Americas.
Yeah.
Tell me about the preparation that goes into the show, like, because I know like it's crazy busy for you right now. This interview will be published after the H&H Americas, but like we're talking right before. Tell me what goes into going to the show.
Yeah. So shows are kind of a crazy thing. And that whole Vogue Knitting live experience was it was even more insane and crazy than any show I've ever done, because I'd never done an in-person event of that scale or international before. But so, for example, for a trade show, which is a bit more contained, the idea there is that we're going to show our range and what we do to trade buyers, so retail stores, yarn stores, who are looking for yarns, perhaps for new yarns to bring into their store environment. So it's different from a retail show in that the idea is not to take loads of stock to sell out of hand from the booth at the actual event, but it's more of a showcase kind of thing. And so in that sense, I kind of have to prepare my very best presentation of the business. It's so just kind of coming up with a concept of what are we going to prepare, what are we going to show, how are we going to show it, and how are we going to show it 7,000 miles away in Chicago in a couple of weeks, and how am I going to get all of those things there? So from here, we have to pack everything up in boxes and ship it. And when you get to Chicago, I have no local knowledge when I get there, so I don't know where to find anything if I don't have it. So I get quite my control freak side definitely comes out in terms of the planning and preparation, so that I've tried to think through all of the possibilities, and that I have a stapler in case I need that for attaching business cards to my notebook. And I have a nylon, I would call it fishing line, for hanging things off the boom and hooks to go on these particular. So there's quite a lot of that kind of thing that happens. And then also obviously the marketing materials and preparation and stuff, that I've contacted different stores and got hold of people ahead of time to say, hey, I'm going to be there. It would be nice to meet you. So there are quite a lot of moving parts that go into it. But it's also, I always feel very relieved once the boxes have shipped, and that will be happening tomorrow or Friday, because then like a chunk of the work is done and I can focus on the next piece of it. But I've done enough shows by now that I do at least have some sense of I will not have planned perfectly. Things won't all turn out the way I imagined they would. And it will still be a fantastic show and really good for business. So
what do you expect from show like H&H?
So I did the first H&H America's show last year, which was still quite deep in the COVID pandemic, and most of us at the show actually ended up getting COVID. And so it was quite small and quite quiet, well, compared to other shows that I've been to, but it's incredibly focused. So what's amazing about the show is that everybody walking around is a potential customer. Like, it's not like some of them are there to buy paper products and some of them are there to buy stationery and some of them are there to buy clothes. Like, everyone is there to buy yarn and fabrics. And so that's pretty incredible.
Right.
And so what I'm expecting is that it'll be busier than last year. And that my goal is to reconnect with some existing customers and to be exposed to a whole lot of new potential customers. So we've got tiny representation in the US. And my bigger goal for the business is to have a stockist retailer in every state.
I'm starting to get Massachusetts store specifically to meet
fabulous.
you.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, that's amazing. So I'm really excited. Like, I've been contacted by a retailer in Oregon and someone in Wisconsin and someone in Missouri. And that's really exciting because the US is a massive country. Like, I can't physically go and travel around every single state. Cold calling and just like searching websites and randomly sending emails is tricky. And so for people to come to a show is amazing. And even if they're not coming, to buy a ticket and do the online version of the show is an incredible experience. So it's massive exposure for us, and it's so niche and so focused.
Well, let me ask you.
I'm excited.
Let me ask you that MBA question. Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
I've actually recently started a process of working with a coach and being coached to figure out exactly some of this. So I think I have a goal for the business and I have a goal for myself, and they're connected but not necessarily exactly the same. And so 10 years from now, I definitely want to have a retailer in every state in the US. And I would like to be spending more time in the US doing more consumer shows as well. But for me, I would like to by then have stepped away from a lot of the day-to-day operational management of the business to be able to focus more on the creative side, both the colors and I'd love to explore designing more of my own projects that we can knit with our yarns. And having a lot more fun. I don't have enough fun in my life at the moment.
Well, do you feel like you don't have enough time to do everything you want to do? Because it's like
yes,
you're exploding with ideas. It's just a matter of implementing them.
I totally am. Exactly. So I said to a friend last night, she's in the US and we were WhatsApping about the show. And I said, my goal is to have people who do all of this prep for me and with me. Because I want to be focusing on a whole lot of those ideas. And so what I thought my second career was going to be in terms of starting a business has been amazing, but I want to tweak that a little bit more as well to almost to being more the creative director than the CEO of the business.
I mean, do you feel like you missed that part? You know, like it's one thing to sit in your kitchen and like play with colors and that dye pot. It's a whole other thing to be responsible for all these families of 13 people and probably growing. Do you miss that independence of sorts? Like
absolutely. The responsibility is killing me. I long to be free. And I want to be free and to be connected. And I accept that there are responsibilities that come with that. And I'm fine with that. But the stress does weigh heavily. And part of that is just a natural part it's one of the natural growing pains of growing a business. We've had huge growth in this year and haven't had the team to support that. And so because it's my business, I take that on. But we have just hired 2 new people and I can see how they're going to have a huge positive impact and are already. So I think a lot of that is just a normal part of the journey, and anyone you talk to who started a business and wanted to grow it will have been through these same phases.
Do you ever, like you said that some of your relatives and friends still can't believe that you're doing this? Do you ever question your sanity into going into this kind of business?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think I don't have children, but a lot of my friends have moved through the early, very intense kind of 0 to 6, 8, or 10 years old children phase. And when they get out of it into the next phase, say, wow, if they'd known what was involved, they might have thought longer and harder before they went into it. And I think it's like all of these things, what you imagine it's going to be versus the actual practical, just day-to-day intensity and relentlessness of different phases of life is just a normal part of the process. And it's the difference between plans and reality, or dreams and reality, and it's kind of supposed to be like that.
I mean, I find
just
it
at a philosophical level, it's what life is.
Right. I mean, I find it ironic because, like, when people think about their business, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to have this flexible schedule and it's going to be so much fun to, like, not to be responsible for, to report to anybody. And then you find yourself working 24/7, and everything is on your shoulders.
Yep. And when I was a consultant, I used to get so frustrated that I didn't have the decision-making responsibility to make changes happen. And now I'm like, oh, it would be so nice just to swan in and say, well, why don't you change this and this and do this here and do this here and do that there? And then to walk away and have no accountability for implementation, because implementation is everything, and it's incredibly challenging.
Right. So how many colors do you guys have now?
So we have a color palette of 30 standard solid colors, semi-solid colors, and 20 variegated colors. So this is a nice way to show you the solid colors, because we have them in the minis there. And then we've got 20 standard variegated colors. We refresh the color palette every year and retire a few colors and bring in some new ones. And then one of my plans is in the second half of this year, when I get back from the show, I'll have a little bit more time, because I like to do a couple of sort of one-off colors every month for myself, to be able to do some dyeing and to have some fresh ideas, and also as a way to experiment with new ideas for things that might then become a standard part of our range.
That sounds fun. If you ever want to create a custom color for Fiberchats, I would love that.
I definitely do want to do that. And if you have some ideas and you want to bring them to H&H and we sit and chat a little bit, yes, absolutely.
Let's do it. That would be
absolutely
so
fun. Visual. So bring me some pictures of places you like, and let's talk about it from there. I'd love to do that. Yeah,
that's like always my dream, to have my own line of like Fiberchats exclusive colors, and so all the people who could get it. You mentioned that you're thinking of like doing your own designs and maybe creating kits for that. What do you feel like you see people wearing your colors when you like just spot somebody in your colors? Are you surprised by what they make with it?
I always feel so privileged in a way that, and I kind of feel like a child. I get so excited. I'm like, oh, I think that's one of my colors. And I'll see someone walking across. When we were at Vogue Knitting Live, there were a couple of people who were wearing some of the knit kit projects that they'd made up. And I would spot them across a room and just get so excited that was something, it's the ultimate creation kind of full circle, to have an idea, to put it out there for someone to buy it and make it, and to actually see it come back to you it's a really beautiful process.
I mean, to me, it's like, so like I always watch other podcasters, and to me it's mind-blowing because I see so much of your yarn being used in different parts of the world. Like, it's sometimes I watch somebody from Scotland, and sometimes it's like South African, sometimes it's American dyers, and sometimes it's European crafters who like, and now I'm gonna work this Cowgirl Blues yarn, and to me, this is like that spread all over the globe. It's just most beautiful thing to see your yarn.
Thank you. Thank you. So Europe has been, we've been selling into Europe for quite some time. The difference in Europe is that we have a distributor there. And so I'm not as connected to the yarn stores or the customers because of that. And one of the challenges with Europe is because of different languages and cultures, I don't always know what people are doing with things. And because I'm so busy and running a business, I don't always watch all the podcasts and stuff, but people send me links and say, oh, I saw you here. Or, my mother just went on a knitting holiday in France, and there's a yarn shop that they go and visit that stocks our yarn, and she was like, oh yes, my daughter's yarn, it's in the yarn shop. And so she was a minor celeb by association, which she really enjoyed. So it's so exciting. I wish I could clearly communicate that to my team in a way that, I saw a really fun thing at Webb's in Massachusetts, where they had a world map with pins in that people put pins from where they're from when they visit the shop. And it's something I've been wanting to do here, so that we can start to mark where our customers come from, but also when we see a project that, like, oh, someone made it there or someone made it there. It would really give people, especially my team, a real sense of kind of what sort of distribution we do have.
I want to do that for my show, because on my channel there are people from like all parts of the world, and I was actually thinking of creating a map and like putting everybody who, like, where they were from, and that would probably cover majority of the world at this point.
Amazing, just amazing.
I mean, to me, this is the best part of any fiber arts business, or even as a hobby, right? These connections, connections that we create with like people from completely different backgrounds, different religious and political beliefs, right? It's something like this international language that connects all of us into this beautiful community. And it's also like, to me, every time I go to show, it's a source of inspiration, like immediately, because you see so much different. And the funny part, like some booths are like, they really stand apart and they stick in your memory, and you're like, okay, like it's not really my colors, but I would love to knit with all of that.
Yeah.
And I find that your colors specifically, like, they set my brain on fire, because like I'm immediately starting to think like, oh my God, like it could be great with this brioche shawl, and it could be great in this setting. So I love that about you. And so when I came to your booth at Vogue Knitting, you gave me a little parcel with like little samples.
Yes.
And I thought it was like a beautiful way to introduce random people to your things, because like at the show it's so crazy, right? It's like everybody, it's overwhelming. But when you come home and suddenly you find that little packet, it's like it sparks that, oh, I remember I met this lady and she gave me this little gift, right? Tell me about this part of marketing of your yarn, like how you come up with those ideas.
I mean, some of them I don't really know. So we if you can see kind of over there on that display, we have our solid colors in lace, kid silk, and merino twist. We do 25 or 50 gram balls, and we wind a bigger skein, and there's often a little bit left over at the end of the skein. And so we would collect those little bits, and I was always trying to think of what could we do with them, because we don't waste things here in Africa. And so I came on the idea of yarn candy. So for a long time we did little yarn candies, and I would always have a bowl at a show or event or in the studio, and we would put them into online orders and things. And then when I was going to a show a couple of years ago, I thought it would be quite useful to put all of the different yarn bases in the same color into a little package that we could share with someone, so that they can get an idea of what the yarns are like. And even though they're just very small little bits of yarn, to actually be able to knit or crochet with them is quite different from, for example, getting a color card where you've maybe just got a few threads that you can feel. And so to me, it was actually to give people the experience of the yarns.
I find it really clever because like I came home with the skein, right? But then I'm thinking like, oh, I could have combined it with the solid color. So when you get that card with like all different kinds of bases, you can play with that and see how you like that. And also like, you know, again, because the show is so overwhelming, like something caught my eyes and I bought those two skeins and I missed everything else. Like I don't know really what else you offering. So having that card at home and seeing all the bases, it's actually like, oh, I should have looked into that and this. And it makes you go back and check out the store again. So I think it was like very clever and very generous.
Thanks. Well, it's also one of those things that you know, often it's difficult to, you know, that skein feels and is very precious as a skein, and you don't want to mess with it until you know what you're going to do with it. And my first job was at Unilever, and I worked in accounts with the marketing team and in the washing powders division. And a huge market for washing powders was actually selling quite small packages of washing powder because people only had a small amount of money to spend. They'd buy a small package and they didn't want to take a risk of buying a huge package if that wasn't the powder they needed. So if you want someone to try something new, you've got to give it to them in a little sample that is easily accessible. And with those little minis, because it was a giveaway, it was a gift, you feel really special because you got a gift, and it doesn't feel like a huge leap to actually try them, because it's not like you invested a lot of money in the skein and, oh, I don't want to spoil it. It's like, okay, this is something for me to try. And so people then go and try the yarns and play with them. And that's how we get people to actually experience our products and then come back for more. It is classic kind of dealer behavior when you want someone to, you know, the people in the supermarket who are giving you free candies and stuff like that, they want you to buy them. But it is also a way of just giving people an experience.
What's your personal stash looks like?
I don't actually have a personal stash because kind of this is my personal stash. I do occasionally buy yarn when I travel. So when I was in the US, I bought a cotton linen blend, which is still sitting in a drawer because I don't have enough time for knitting, and I'm always working on Cowgirl Blues samples, so it's hard to knit something else. So I've got a little bit of linen, I've got a little bit of cotton, I've got some raw silk that I bought in Japan, but I don't have a big stash because I have a massive stash right here, and I have been known to come into work over a weekend to grab something that I need to get started on a project. So yeah, can I show you my most recent finished object?
Oh, please.
Yes, so this is a sample for H&H. I'm going to step back a little bit so that I can show it to you. So it is it's petite knit Sunday sweater, and I love yarn combining. So you can see over here, it's in our Aran single, which is in the olive, and then I put in the merino lace in the Bette Midler colorway. So you get little flecks of color all the way through, and I really like the effect. So
it's so beautiful. I can't wait to see.
You can see it in person at H&H.
Well, you want to see what I'm planning to wear there?
Yes.
It's not done yet. It's still on my needles, but that's my plan for.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's this way. So
gorgeous.
I'm trying to finish the first sleeve.
Very nice.
The second one, and it's by Bethman Stone. So I'm test knitting for her, and I'm thinking, like, you know what? I'll get to wear it there.
Absolutely.
We'll get to touch each other's sweaters and see them in person.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to meet you there again and see you there and spend some time with you in Chicago at the show. And we'll get to chat there, and I'll get to squish some of your beautiful yarn again.
Thanks, Irina, and thanks so much for having me on your show. It's been really lovely to talk to you. You've asked such interesting questions, and it's nice to reflect with you, and I really appreciate your interest.
Oh, thank you so much for being my guest today. I loved having you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.